dearly beloved, the hour had now come, when the Son of Man would be delivered into the hands of sinners. Behold, Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 apostles, and with him, a great multitude, with lanterns and tools, with clubs and swords. And he went before them, as the leader of my persecutors, and accosting me with a false heart, "Hail Rabbi," he said, and he kissed me, and so betrayed me to them. But I, knowing all that was to come, was more intensely grieved, in my innermost heart, as the wretched fate of my unhappy disciple, and of the crowd, than at my own suffering. Therefore, I began to try my utmost, and leave nothing undone, to soften and win their hearts. Disregarding altogether the insult offered, with a friendly countenance, and a more loving heart, I kindly addressed that apostle, "Friend, where art thou come?" His heart remained insensible to so great a goodness. To make him enter into himself, I urged him gently and powerfully, at the same time, to cause him to understand that I knew his crime, and to induce him to reflect on the enormity of it. "Judas," I said, "Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss?" He did not heed my saving voice, but, on the contrary, hardened his heart. Then, at last, I had recourse to my omnipotence, yet so not to interfere with his free will. Behold now, by a miracle, at the mere sound of my voice, as if struck by lightning, I laid prostrate the treacherous disciple, and his whole crowd, and sent at the same time a powerful grace to his heart. That unfeeling heart was moved, but he was unwilling to hearken to its emotion. He felt the grace, but he would not yield to the same. My child, if by meditation, you were able to some extent to understand with how great a love my heart had, at all times, pursued them, from whom I received such things in return, and how it had ever heaped new favors upon them, you should comprehend how unutterable were the sorrows which, like torrents, rushed upon, and overflowed, my heart. When you have anything similar to suffer, child, do not lose courage, but let the example, which I gave you for your instruction, and to comfort, animate, and console you. Remember my saying, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, what wonder if they also persecute you? If the world hates you, call to mind how it hated me first. Know, my child, so long as you are the disciple of my heart, so as to abhor the world and its sentiments, that wicked enemy will oppose you. Your manner of acting, the enemy will call hypocrisy, singularity, or some other vice. At one time, the enemy will pretend that it pities you, and another time, it will make mockery of you. When you withdraw into solitude, the enemy will accuse you of melancholy, or sourness of temper. If you appear in public, it will endeavor to blacken your virtues, and your faults. It will either exaggerate beyond measure, or flatter you for them, seeking your destruction. If, according to the zeal of your charity, you labor for the salvation of the world, you shall for the most part find an unfeeling indifference, or receive in return bitter ungratefulness. These things, and the like, will the votaries of the world do to you, not the open ones alone, but also they that are secretly such, not only they that publicly persecute virtue, but also they that apparently seem to reverence piety, but, in reality, think hardly otherwise than the very worldlings. Child, these things I have foretold you, that when they come to pass, you may remember my word, and cheered on by my example, remain firm in your resolve, and be able to feel compassion for them that afflict you, to pray for them, and even to be zealous for their salvation. Be assured that such wretched men are deserving of pity. They injure themselves rather than you. Beware of men. Do not rely on them while they favor you, nor be troubled when they go against you. If you deport yourself towards others, as to your heart pure and free, you will bring yourself to me, with more reason and profit, when they trouble you, and you shall preserve your peace, and gain merit. Go, child, Dwell among men, wherever you will find everywhere those who will try your patience. Should you deal with the devout only, should you live among people, secluded from the world, and with body and soul, consecrated to me, even there, you shall not be secure against opponents. If among my 12 apostles, there was one who persecuted me, do not wonder that among them that profess a life of piety, even the religious state, there will be some, who oppose you. Child, all they that desire to lead an interior life, shall suffer persecution. For to an interior, and devoted disciple of my heart, persecution is never wanting. And, indeed, persecution is manifold, just as martyrdom is manifold. For there is persecution from enemies, and from friends, there is persecution from the visible foes, and from the invisible foes as well, there is persecution from the wicked, and also from the good. So there is a martyrdom of faith, there is also one of charity, there is a martyrdom of the body, there is also one of the soul, lastly, there is a great martyrdom of the heart. My child, if you desire to become a perfect disciple of my heart, you must, in some manner or another, be a martyr. For, as such a disciple, you are a companion of the saints. Gaze upon that mighty host, which no one can count, standing before the throne of the divine majesty, with palms in their hands, the symbol of martyrdom. Although the saints did not all shed their blood, all did undergo sufferings, that they might obtain the palm of martyrdom. But observe, my child, that no one, who is truly a martyr, chooses for himself, by his own will, his own martyrdom, but that he suffers that one, which has been inspired, or appointed him, from above. Believe, therefore, that to be your martyrdom, whatever has been presented to you, by divine providence in your state, employment, or other circumstances, that you are placed in. To obtain an opportunity of suffering martyrdom, it is not necessary to take yourself to infidel and barbarous nations, or to look for an avowed persecutor of the church. The world persecutes you, man troubles you, one betrays you, another mocks and derides you, this one humbles you, that one opposes you, corrupt nature, or an ill-regulated propensity, resists you, something else, is a source of grief to you. My child, here is your persecutor. Despite the contradiction of men, and their opposition, despite their sayings, and annoyances, you keep bravely, and generously, the precepts of religion, and your rules. You practice virtue, and you employ yourself in piety. Behold, your martyrdom of faith. Pray for your persecutors. Love and help, in spite of natural repugnance, your neighbors, who are ill-affected towards you. Be zealous for their salvation, and offer up your prayers, labors, and sufferings. This is your martyrdom of charity. Sickness torments you, your head, your breast, your limbs are aching, hard work is killing you. Behold, the martyrdom of your body. You suffer interior anguish, you feel racking temptations, or such things, as divine love employs, to purify altogether, and to perfect your soul. Behold, the martyrdom of the soul, and of the heart. But remember, my child, that for those who have attained to the use of reason, an unwilling martyrdom, or one, which they endure for some cause or reason, whatever it may be, is of no avail, for it must be undergone willingly, with resignation, or, at least, with patience, for the love of God. It is not enough then, to suffer, but you must suffer voluntarily, for my love. A martyrdom, not quickened by divine love, is dead, and worthless. Behold, child, a manifold crown is offered to you, one which thousands of mortals, of every state and condition of life, have eagerly sought for, one, which so many youths and maidens, have exultingly borne off, and are not you also able, and willing to pursue, and obtain the same? Look up to heaven, contemplate the glory of the saints, and their blessedness, remember that they are your brothers, and sisters, raise your courage, secure for yourself, a crown and palm, that you may be received, among them. When the crowds had drawn near, and laid hands on me, my disciples all fled, and left me alone, in the midst of my enemies. Such are they, my child, whom I had chosen, whom I had trained, with all care, solicitude, and love of my heart, to whom I had made known all things, all I had heard from my Father. These are the very same, that, a little before, had all, in like manner, protested that, even if it were necessary to die with me, they would not deny me. But now, when it was the power of darkness, and the time of trial, forgetful of me, their Savior and Father, they all became runaways. Reflect, my child, how grievous this total dereliction, on the part of my disciples, wounded my heart. Give heed and ponder, with what sentiments of heart, I bore this affliction. If you truly enter into these sentiments of my heart, you shall be able to endure calmly, and meritoriously, for my sake, to be forsaken by all men. It does not happen rarely, that man is suffered to be abandoned, even in his distress, by persons very useful, or necessary to him, that thus, he may be assimilated more perfectly to me, and be raised higher, in sanctity. This shows forth, more gloriously, the power of my love, which so strengthened weak man, that, though alone, he stands ever firm, even while the raging winds, and storms of adversity, are rushing upon him. This too is often useful, that man may highly free himself from creatures, and leave himself, completely. For when on the one hand, he sees himself forsaken by men, he easily withdraws his heart from them, to give it to me, who abandons no one, and when on the other hand, he perceives that he is unequal to the troubles which assail him, he comes, as it were, of his own accord, to me, and throws himself, and all he has, into my paternal bosom. It is indeed heroic and worthy of the divine approval, that a person, abandoned by all, be equally satisfied with this dereliction, love the more purely those who forsake him, endure willingly, for my love, the loss of man's affections, and repose, amid all accidents, in me alone. This, surely, is the mark of a humble heart, which gives itself wholly to my love. When one possesses the affections of another, although he may have a good enough object in view, he frequently allows much to creep in, which is ill-regulated, or at least, merely human. But I, who am a zealous lover of the heart, who do not wish that man's heart should be busied except with me, or for me, am wont to arrange matters, that he is sometimes forsaken, or discarded by mortals, even by those who it seems ought to have shared with him, his weal or woe, till death. A person must contend much, and long, with himself, that he may order perfectly the desire of being loved by others. My child, it is one thing to wish or seek this for yourself, and another, to seek it or desire it for my sake. If you seek another's affections, in order to delight or repose yourself, if you desire them on account of personal qualities, to indulge your own inclination, finally, if in any manner, you wish for them, as, either directly or indirectly, to finish with self some gratification of nature, you would be seeking to be loved, for your own sake. If, on the contrary, you desire or strive to gain the love of others, in order to devote yourself to my interests, to secure their everlasting salvation, or to promote the perfection of souls, to extend the kingdom of my love, to win hearts for me, you then seek to be loved, for my sake. Now, my child, if in a direct or indirect manner, you aspire to be loved for yourself, this, although it be done with no evil intention, is inordinate, since not you, but I myself, am your end, therefore it is imperfect, and, what is more to be dreaded, it is wont, not only to lead to sin, but also, to entangle men. But, if you desire to be loved for my sake, Your love is well ordered, it is pure, it is love for me, it is a love for with which the saints have loved, and sought to be loved, by means of which they have accomplished much good, and which you have accomplished much good, in which you, child, should employ, in the same manner. There is hardly anything in the world, to which the human heart cleaves, with more feeling, than to friendship, which, full of charge as it is wont to be very advantageous, or very prejudicial. A precious possession hard to find, more difficult to keep, is genuine, pure friendship, whereby one moves sincerely, for love of me, whereby one seeks the true good of another, as his own, whereby, without flattery, without human respect, one takes care to correct the faults of the other, to cheer him on, and assist him to acquire virtue and sanctity, whereby one is faithful to the other, in adversity and prosperity, in death, after death, as well as life. My child, if you love anyone, and so love him that you grow uneasy in consequence, that you are moved rather frequently to occupy your mind and heart with him, at proper and improper times, that you desire to hold long frequent conversations with him, that you give heed to his outward accomplishments, and entertain or direct your affections by them, that you make bold to express your admiration for him, or to flatter him, in his presence, that you call his defects by an honorable name, or excuse them, that you take ill that others be loved by him, that you seem in some sort inconsolable, or too unhappy, when you must part with him, then your love, or friendship, is not genuine, nor pure, even if you do not observe it, even if you do not suspect it. But, if on the contrary, you experience none of these things, you have a good sign, in favor of your love and friendship. My child, if you have a true and sincere friend, a rare treasure, deport yourself in a becoming manner, in his regard, and so deal with him, that whether he remains faithful, or proves faithless, you never regret at having acted this way. But, although friendship, founded upon love for me, is of itself good, you should, however, keep your heart free, that if I dispose things, you are willing to possess me alone, instead of all others, as the friend who suffices for you. Your heart shall never be altogether quiet, nor prepared for an intimate union with me, whatever else you may do, unless you soar above every natural affection, love with my love alone, and repose in the soul love of me. Therefore, child, center your affections on me, bind your heart to mine, that it may neither fall nor shake, if men withdraw themselves. What are men, except pliant and frail reeds, whereon you cannot lean securely, if you will not expose yourself to the risk of reeling or falling? Even if mortals should not depart from you, you yourself must in a short time depart from them, since death separates each and all. When you are forsaken by men, you shall nowhere find a surer, nor greater solace, than near me, who was for love of you treated in the same manner. Be not exasperated, child, nor complain, as if you did not deserve to be so dealt with, at least by this, or by that one. Ah, my child, if you are not willing to suffer, except from whom it may please you, what principle of virtue do you possess? And if you are willing to suffer only what you have deserved, what greatness is there in that? Or what is there that is worthy of a disciple of my heart? If any, in some manner or other, fall away from you, show them by your friendly disposition, your mildness, and your honorable treatment of them, what pure charity is able to do, which, overlooking all repugnance of natural feeling, devotes itself rather to their good, than to your own inclination, even after they have rendered themselves as unworthy. It is true, child, it is difficult to go against nature, but a humble disciple of my heart, one who is animated by love for me, does not regard the opposition of nature, but the object of his love, and while another, in his coldness and lukewarmness, remains hesitating, he in his fervor has already surmounted the difficulty. Inflame your heart with the fire of love, wherewith my heart is burning, glow with that fire, love with that love. If you do this, all difficulties will flee before you and disappear. My child, the soldier, and the attendants of the Jews, rising from the ground, rushed upon me, and having seized me, they bound me. Child, behold the Lamb of God, in the hands of the executioners, bound for the sacrifice, bound, because he willed it, and he willed it, because he loved. For the chains of love pressed my heart more tightly, than the fetters of my enemies, bound my hands. And, unless my heart, led captive by love, had hindered it, my almighty hands could have destroyed my enemies, and broken their chains. But love endures all things, no humiliation does it think too great, no suffering does it consider excessive. Whatever it wills, it seizes and holds, and remains itself always free. Oh, if you knew, my child, how great a blessedness it is to be the captive of divine love, assuredly you would not, even if you were able, even for a moment, desire to be your own master, but you would willingly deliver up body and soul, yourself, and all you have, that by it you might be bound and held. He that resides under divine love thinks neither persecutions, nor chains, nor imprisonment, nor death itself, suffered for my sake, anything doleful or unfortunate, but he rather deems it an object worthy of holy ambition, to suffer all this, for love of me. Why do you think it happens that some, when, to keep the faith, they must suffer chains, or inconveniences, do not remain in the truth, but go after the inventions of men, and fall into the judgment of condemnation? Is it not because they are not impelled by pure love for me, so as to be willing to lose their life in this world, that they may save it in the next? Hence, child, as they are unwilling to be my fellow captives, they become prisoners of the devil, and as they desire to save their life in time, they lose it in eternity. My child, if ever it be your lot to undergo chains or imprisonment for virtue, do not fear them that may kill the body, but can do nothing beyond, but rather fear him who can destroy body and soul forever. It is a great grace, a happiness, to undergo afflictions, for my sake, if you suffer them unmeritedly. Whilst partaking of my sufferings, it benefits you to rejoice, as about to exult, in the revelation of my glory. Let none suffer as a wrongdoer, a scoffer, or a criminal, but, if as my disciple, let him not be ashamed, let him glorify me in that name, by enduring courageously, and perseveringly, piously and humbly, manifesting his joy, for that he is reckoned among them, who are deemed worthy to suffer, for my sake, and thus, to become saints. Some of whom were racked, some underwent mockeries, and stripes, besides chains and prisons, others were stoned, others were tortured, and cut asunder, others perished by the sword, others finally, wandered about in sheepskin, and disguised in other garments, in want, distressed, afflicted, wandering over mountains, in dens, and in caves of the earth. But to them, of whom the world was not worthy, because they persevered, and overcame with me, by suffering, I gave to sit with me on a throne, as also I, by suffering, persevered and overcame, and am seated on a throne, with my Father. How blissful are you, my child, if, for my sake, you become a partner in affliction, with these. Because whatever there is, of everlasting glory and honor, whatever there is, of true virtue and holiness, whatever, finally, there is, of the spirit of my heart, rests upon you. But not everyone is given an opportunity of suffering chains and tortures for virtue. All of those who, however, strive after a perfect imitation of my heart, can, and must, in some sort, become captives, for the sake of virtue. For who is there that cannot bring the senses of his body into captivity, not merely that they may do no evil, nor yield to vanity, but that they may be held within restraint, and exercised in the practice of virtue? Few, however, preserve their senses within the limits of reason, and fewer still mortify them according to the principles of faith. My child, how do you deal with the senses of your body? Do you not suffer them to be free too? Consider what, in regard to them, is desired for perfection. As to the powers of the soul, can you not also, in some manner, bring them into captivity? Your imagination, so tenacious of the past, and so inquisitive as to the future, you will force by degrees, to be sufficiently subject to you, if you recall her forthwith, when she makes her escape, of at home, you entertain her constantly, with useful things, if you repress assiduously, her sudden impulses and triflings, until she be accustomed, to remain quiet. Keep your mind wholly subject, as is proper, in obedience to faith, lest by chance, becoming a searcher of majesty, you be overwhelmed by glory, or a fugitive from truth, you become a slave of error. No, more subdue your opinions and, unless some other virtue forbid it, subject the same, for charity's sake, to the judgment of others. By doing so, you shall gain the more truth, like your own opinions appears, and the more difficult it is consequence, to subdue the same. To be inwardly and outwardly unguarded and dissipated, proceeds from the defect of a heart, which is a slave, either to its enemies, to its passions, or even to itself. Your chief care, therefore, should be to keep your heart free from the servitude of all things inferior. For only then will you be able to devote it, in its vigor, with all its affections, to pure, supernal charity, and to become my fellow captive, in the chains of divine love. Marvelous is charity in its workings. If you serve charity, all things shall be turned for you, into blessings. Love me, child, your God and Savior. By loving you will easily learn to love me more perfectly. Love is better learned and perfected by loving, than by speculating. If your heart is wholly submissive to my love, you will easily and carefully guard against that false freedom, of thinking, of speaking, of acting, according to as you feel inclined. This mad license, not true freedom, what else is it except a cloak of the passions, the bane of virtue, the realm of vice, the misfortune of families, the ruin of cloisters, the plague of society? And the more widely this daily evil spreads among the godly, the more cunningly it enters even among religious. With more care, you ought to put yourself on guard, lest it also infect your heart, and lest, under the appearance of good, it draw the same way, from the servitude of humble love, to the freedom of the flesh, which leads to the slavery of hell. You cannot be your own master, however much you may desire, and strive to be so. You are bound to love, and, therefore, to devote yourself to some object, even in spite of yourself. But you cannot give yourself up to anything created, without the most grievous injustice, and the base ingratitude to me, and without manifold evil to yourself. Therefore, child, willingly be mine. Give yourself up to my love, since in order that you might be mine, I was willing to be a captive for you. How happy you shall be, when bound, inwardly and outwardly, by the same chains of love, that unite with me, the angels and saints in heaven. My child, here, you shall see the Son of Man, although, the supreme judge of the living, and the dead, cited, accused, and condemned, by sinners deserving everlasting death. For, they led me bound, to the high priests, and the scribes and Pharisees, had assembled. The chiefs of the priests, and the whole council, sought false witness against me, that they might put me to death. And many coming forward, bore false witness against me. The high priest, rising up, said to me, Do you have nothing to say of the things, which men bring against you? My child, what do you think? Did I reply to their false testimony, and to the words, of the high priest, in order to defend myself? What does it say in Scripture? But Jesus was silent. My child, I was silent with my tongue, as a man that has no disproof in his mouth, but with my heart, I spoke to my heavenly Father, conforming myself to his good pleasure, and begging him to have pity on those wretched men, to pour into their hearts the abundant grace of the Holy Spirit, in order to save their unhappy souls. my child, knowing that it is most painful to be assailed with false accusations, and most difficult to bear them perfectly. I will that my heart should be in the highest degree assaulted and overwhelmed with unjust calumnies, that, when you yourself are falsely accused, you may find some solace in my heart, which was similarly afflicted, and from its example receive a secure guidance. And truly, there is hardly anything more painful to the human heart than to be defamed with false accusations. Hence, some people are thereby so disturbed in their reason, that, overcome by feeling, if they could lawfully choose, they would prefer to die, rather than to live so dishonored. My child, take heed, lest you suffer yourself to be troubled, or be clouded in mind, but, with a calm heart, examine the matter better, act as a worthy disciple of my heart. Remember, that neither the malice of those that defame you by false reports, nor the error of those who believe the falsehood, can make you different from what you are, nor take away the virtue of your greatness of soul, which lifts itself above falsehood uttered and believed. If you view the matter in the light of faith, you shall see that its sublime excellence, heavenly honor, everlasting reward, corresponds to the greatness of your humiliation. And although you may be innocent of the fault subjected to you, as, however, you have in many things offended the divine majesty, you should willingly embrace the opportunity of satisfying for those things in time, which otherwise may remain to be atoned for in eternity. Even if you should prefer to cleanse yourself of your offenses, and to enter heaven by other means, yet you should rather receive these things offered to you by divine providence, as both more certain and more secure. However painful these things may be to the feelings of nature, suffer them, my child, undergo them, for love of me, bear them with me. And if your heart almost fails you for grief, come to my heart, which suffered so much more pain, for your sake. Here, strengthen your heart, protesting that, in spite of nature, for love of me, to be resigned. I am absolutely unwilling, my child, that you should hate the neighbor, however much he may have wronged you. But, although I gave a command of loving even enemies, yet I insisted on no precept of being silent, or of omitting to justify yourself against the false accusations. A counsel, however, I give, unless silence be sinful. He who, when falsely accused, speaks with a sincere heart, and in a proper manner, in his own defense, does not sin, but he that does not speak, does better. It is certainly a very great perfection to endure in silence false accusations, to suffer that men believe about you, whatever they may please, to entrust yourself entirely to me alone, and with resignation, remain with me. In this, grace triumphs, this fills the angels with admiration, this unites you in fellowship with the saints, this gives glory to God in the highest, this proves you truly a humble lover of me, and a genuine disciple of my heart. This is the great secret of the interior life, drawn out of my heart, which many hear, and many even admire, but which few relish, and fewer follow. The saints, however, appreciated this fully, and found it quite to their taste. Burning with love for me, and animated with a desire of following me, they suffered, with a joyful heart, false testimonies of every kind. And when with one word, they might have justified themselves, and regained their good name, entrusting their care of defense to me, they preferred to be silent with me, and to be considered the outcast and offscouring of this world, lest they might be found to be unlike me, and display a doubtful love. It is true, my child, that this is neither easy, according to human feelings, nor does natural reason alone furnish a sufficient incitement, but feeling and reason must be transcended by means of faith and love, which present and press forward abundant and most powerful motives and incentives. No, child, if you are not willing to act, except from feeling or a natural reason, you shall not only never be perfect, but not even saved. Live by faith, act out of love for me. And if nature resists, because it dreads mortification or humiliation, let this itself be a new recommendation for you, to be silent, that you may overcome ill-ordered nature. Doubtless, the enemy of your salvation, perfection, who is always roaming about to ensnare, will draw near to you, and suggest numerous, troublesome, and plausible things, but do not hearken to his suggestions. Turn away your mind from him, or say to him with scorn, "Begone, Satan," for it is better to follow the divine Savior, who goes and shows a safe and secure way, than to leave the company of Jesus, to search out another uncertain and dangerous road. Perhaps someone may ask you, "Answerest thou nothing to the things which are objected to thee by these persons?" My child, make no reply to this question, but imitate me, and remain silent. If they insist, sayest thou not, that thy despised name, the edification of thy scandalized neighbor, the honor of insulted virtue, God's glory itself, demand of thee, that thou do justify thyself? Do not believe them, child, it is not so. If circumstances appeared to require that I should speak, to justify myself, it was doubtless then, when I remained silent. They did not however require it, for had they required it, I would have spoken. Let the matter rest, my child, and entrust it wholly to me, that, in the wisdom and goodness of my heart, I may do that which is best for me, and for you. Therefore, suffer with me in silence and patience. I know the accuser, and the accused, the judge, and him that is judged, he that humbles, and he that is humbled, I myself, will repay at the proper time, and give to each, according to his works. That you are able to persevere, frequently call to your mind, with what feeling of pain, I myself endured greater humiliations, with how courageous a mind, and how generous a heart, I bore them for love of you. And now, surely, you will not refuse to love me, in return, who loves you so much, nor to undergo lesser humiliations, for the sake of my love. Do not fear confusion, embrace it with a noble heart. It will not lower you, it will not harm you, on the contrary, it will elevate you, make you like me, it will adorn you with merit, and sanctify, it will replenish you with the sweetest unction of consolation. My child, when the testimony of those who accused me did not agree, the high priest, that he might find a plea for condemning me, addressed me again saying, Are you the Christ, the Son of the blessed God? I adjure you, by the living God, that you tell us, if you are the Christ, the Son of God? Since all things in heaven, in earth, and under the earth, had bore evident and superabundant witness to my divinity, there was no need to answer the high priest, who was tempting me, however, to manifest the reverence due to the living and blessed God, my Father, to give testimony to the truth, even at the risk of my own life, to move the hearts of these wretches, if, perhaps, they might be willing to hearken to grace. I replied, I am. And you shall see the Son of Man, sitting on the right hand of the power of God, and coming in the clouds of heaven. My child, had they heeded these clear and sacredly terrific words, would they not have suddenly changed from judges into supplicants, have cast themselves at my feet, imploring pardon and mercy? But the unhappy high priest, with his counsel, spurned both the proffered grace and the salutary warnings. For the wicked man, when he is come into the depth of sins, contemneth. Then the chief of the priests rent his garments, exclaiming, He has blasphemed. Now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? But they all cried out together, that I was guilty of death. After this iniquitous and cruel insult, at which all heaven was horrified, behold, more atrocious and painful things awaited me in the hands of the rabble, to be tortured during the remainder of the night. Whatever you may do, my child, however intently you may meditate, you cannot fully understand the sufferings of my heart during that saddest of nights. Then, child, they spat in my face, that face whereon the angels longed to gaze, and they that held me vied with each other to mock and insult me. And that they might act with more freedom, they covered my face, and casting aside all restraint, some buffeted me, others struck my face with the palms of their hands, insolently saying, Prophesy to us, O Christ, who is it that struck you? Others, in fine, uttered many other blasphemous things, and heaped many indignities upon me. Behold the Son of God, as it were, a worm, and no man, the reproach of men, and the outcast of the people. Meanwhile, my child, I was like a lamb before its shearer, neither opening my mouth, nor showing any signs of revenge, of anger, or impatience. But, drowning in my heart the intense sorrows I displayed, in look and gesture, and invincible meekness, in order that my enemies themselves, struck with so great an example of forbearance, might be converted, and that you, my child, being thus encouraged, might not refuse to imitate me, through love. For if I, the Son of the living and blessed God, endured for love of you such cruel and incomprehensible tortures, is it too much that, for love of me, you should bear some insulting word, some ignominious appellation, or some reproachful action? If you are unwilling for my sake to undergo similar things, little indeed, in comparison of what I suffered for you, how can you believe you have a true love for me, a love worthy either of myself, or of a disciple of my heart? Ask the saints. Even the least among them will answer you by deeds, glorious both to themselves and to me. Assuredly, those generous hearts would have been ashamed, and would have deemed their love either of no account, or false, and thought themselves undeserving of the special affection of my heart, had they not lovingly undergone the humiliations presented to them by me. Do not say that you are unable to endure such humiliations, because you are not a saint, for you are able, if you are willing, with the aid of my grace, which shall not be wanting. If then, you do not undergo them, you prove by the fact, not that you are unable, but that you are not really willing. If you are not a saint, are in concert with grace, and willingly suffer humiliations, and you will become a saint. My child, whether you are willing or not. So long as you live among mortals, you cannot be safe from every kind of humiliations. Therefore, you should have your heart always ready, that whenever any do come upon you, you may have recourse to me, and implore my help. It will happen, and even for your own good, my child, that men do not only oppose or overlook you, but even that, before your face, they provoke or insult you. Then, if you do not come speedily to me, by means of prayer, you shall find yourself exposed to great trouble and danger. They that are still beginners in the interior life, and little advanced in mortification of heart, are easily disturbed by violent affronts, because unsubdued nature, when an opportunity presents itself, rebels, and excites a great dread of humiliation, and a lively feeling of worldly honor. Yet all worldly honor is mere emptiness, for it does not rest upon truth, but depends upon the voluble tongues of men, who flatter, or speak evil, at pleasure. But to endure by virtue the humiliation of an affront, is true glory, because it renders man similar to me, and deserves an imperishable diadem. The best defense of honor is an heroic generosity of heart. And, with men, is not meekness or clemency of more avail to protect or regain a good reputation than anger or revenge? The latter betrays a little mind, and openly displays a heart enslaved to the passions. The former proves a great soul, a noble heart, and claims perforce the silent admiration of enemies, in spite of themselves. Hence, even a pagan said, to conquer oneself, not only to raise an opponent, but even to load him with favors. Whoever does this, him I do not compare to the greatest men, but I judge him most like to God. Upon these things, however, child, I will that you should look as secondary only, and that you should ascend higher, to supernatural motives, lest you reap no fruit for eternity, from your arduous efforts, and painful sufferings. There are many persons to whom worldly vanity is more palatable than my example, and who prefers to be slaves to their passions, rather than to be assimilated to me. To such a degree do some allow themselves to be carried away by their passions, that when calumniated, they rather inflict death on their own soul, and expose themselves to the torments of hell, than let the offender go unpunished, or generously to pardon the injury of a moment. Woe to men, endowed with divine faith, who live worse than the heathen, guided by reason alone. Unhappy men! They shall see at last how foolishly, how wickedly, they are acting, who, when an opportunity is given them, of appeasing God, of expiating their sins, of gathering merits, instead of doing so, provoke God to wrath, heap up sins, and aggravate the torments they shall have to undergo. The more courageous anyone is to conquer himself, and the more numerous and difficult the victories he gains, the stronger shall he become against himself, and the more easy and fruitfully he shall render victories. Therefore, my child, cheer up your courage, overcome yourself, that you may ascend to me, that you may follow me. By this do you judge your virtue, the sincerity of your love for me. By this do you distinguish whether you are a true disciple of my heart. Mark this well: if, in order to follow the divine will, you do not counter to the repugnance of nature, even should you work miracles, should you daily sour into ecstasy, know that all your piety is nothing more than simple delusion. Be generous, and follow me, your leader, and protector, and comforter. Do not care what men may do to you, or what may be the feeling of rebellious nature. If your heart does not reproach you, when, with a meek and lowly heart, you endure wrongs done, have confidence, my child, for you have a sign of my grace, present and abiding in you. For a representation of fire does not burn, neither does a mere simulation of love the sufferer. When it was morning, my child, all the chiefs of the priests and the ancients of the people returned to the council, and soon the whole multitude, dragging me in chains through the streets, led me to Pilate, a heathen, and the governor of Judea. They, standing outside, with loud cries, called out the governed, and began to accuse me before him of many various crimes. But Pilate, hearing that I was of the jurisdiction of Herod, king of Galilee, sent me to him. Herod, another heathen, was rejoiced at the sight of me, for he had heard much concerning me, and hoped to see some miracles performed, to gratify his curiosity. But to a carnal man, who does not understand the things of God, although himself put many questions, and the Jews were accusing me unceasingly, I answered nothing, yet, in my silence, I displayed so eloquent a modesty and holiness, that he could perceive that he was receiving a silent and befitting admonition, and that my example might move him to conversion. However, this earthly-minded person, abusing all these graces, and not able to understand why I did not defend myself, why I did not seek to gain his favor, attributed my conduct to stupidity and foolishness. Therefore, Herod and his army despised me, and put on me a white garment, as if I were a madman. Thus he mocked and insulted me. Then sending me back, in the same garment, to Pilate, he exposed me, as a simpleton, to the city and the world. O my child, you know neither my heart, nor your own. The pride of your own heart demanded so great a remedy. For if you dare to be proud, after you have seen how the Son of Man was treated for your sake, as a madman and a simpleton, what would you not do, with such a great example such as mine? Would not self-love, by its subtlety, set aside every precept, and aim at the very summit of pride? Therefore, from the greatness of the remedy, learn the grievousness of the disease, and hence, measure on the one side, the abyss of your heart's misery, and on the other, the depth of my heart's love. Deep was calling on deep, the love of my heart, heard and will, that I should be humbled, to the deep, that I might snatch you, from the abyss. Notwithstanding that, I felt an unutterable pang in my human nature, yet for your sake, I underwent with a willing mind, this depth of humiliation, in the hope of gaining at last, by so great a demonstration of love, your whole heart, of inflaming it, with the same love, of animating it, with the same sentiments. It was an unfathomable mystery, child, that God himself should appear among men, as foolish. A mystery, which love alone did work by its excess, and for which love alone is able to account. For my heart, made captive by love, was also urged forward, by this same love, through humiliations, through ignominy, through reproach, through the appearance of madness itself, feeling most bitterly, all the while, the painfulness of shame, and yet willingly embracing its disgrace. If anyone loves me, he will keep my word. The disciple is not above his master, but everyone shall be perfect, as he is, as his master. Therefore, my child, if you truly love me, you will not refuse to bear with me the name of one unsound, or foolish in mind, whenever I suffer you to be distinguished by such an appellation. It is not lawful that of yourself you should give cause for anything of the kind, but to suffer that others take occasion to do so, or to desire that, without offending God, an occasion may be given, to be accounted silly, or foolish, for my sake, is truly an heroic virtue, and a very great perfection. Be ready, dear child, to appear, in some manner, foolish to men, for, in whatever condition you may live, you shall be sometimes considered such, if you are willing to be a perfect disciple of my heart. A life interior and devout, not merely in name, but also in fact, cannot be accounted otherwise than as a kind of folly, by the votaries of the world's opinion. For how otherwise than foolish, must it appear to them, to despise the present advantages of the world, in the hope of future blessings, to love property, and keep the affections, disengaged from the things of earth, to submit the will and judgment to others, even when inferior to you in virtue and science, to mortify unceasingly the senses of the body, without necessity, to seek no reparation for injury, to love enemies, in sincerity of heart, to love humiliations, and esteem them to be advantages? Come then, my child, be comforted, and with a great heart, and willing mind, endure all things with me. For by the disposition of my providence, what you undertake will, sometimes, have no success, in the same undertaking, and the greater it be, the more silly you shall appear. When accused, reprimanded, or ridiculed, you will be silent, and you will be looked upon as so stupid, by them that do not know the exquisite wisdom of my heart. When you disregard opportunities of seeking your own advantage, in order to promote my interests, you shall appear to many as devoid of common sense. If intent on dying to yourself, in order to live for me alone, you shall be censured by some, as being feeble-minded through indiscretion, also, through false piety. These and similar things shall befall you, child, not only from themselves, that show themselves votaries of the world, but sometimes, from those that make profession of a virtuous life, or even of the religious state, and who, as they do not possess my interior spirit, love, indeed, the virtues whereby they may please themselves and others, but do not relish my afflictions, my ignominy, my humiliations. By them, to whom the excess of my humiliations is a stumbling block in practice, you shall often be treated most harshly, and shall be made to feel most keenly. Do not lose courage, or be dejected in heart, my child, whoever the persons, by whom you are dealt with, in this manner. On the contrary, cheer up and rejoice, bear it, at least with patience, if you cannot yet do so, with gladness. Is it not better to be considered a foolish with me, than to be deemed wise by men alone? Verily, whoever is willing, for my sake, to be looked upon as foolish in this world, shall receive in return 100-fold blessings in this life, and unfailing glory in the life everlasting. These results the saints themselves experience, and they found more and better things than they had understood, or had dared to expect. You also, my child, make the experiment, and you shall also meet the same reward. This is the highest wisdom, which the world and its votaries neither do, nor can know, but which the meek and humble disciples of my heart understand, and relish. If you love this teaching of my heart, if you act by its spirit, well done, child, well done. Be glad and rejoice, because you have become like unto me. It is a most weighty matter, but lighten it by love, and to cheer you on, call to mind the speedy end, and the everlasting reward in heaven, where after a short time you shall be with me, and where you shall shine, with so much the greater honor, before the angels and saints, with how much the heavier weight of humiliations you have been pressed down before men. These things have I spoken, child, of my heart, that, when they shall come to pass, you may have recourse to me, that in me you may possess peace and consolation, that, with me, you may persevere. being led back to the residence of the governor, I stood before him. He knew that through envy I had been delivered up to him by the priests and Pharisees. As Pilate had no doubt of my innocence, he desired to free me, if he could effect this without displeasing the Jews. Therefore, he bethought himself of an expedient, which showed the base weakness of his soul, and covered me with the utmost disgrace. On the festive day, the governor was accustomed to release to the people one of the prisoners, whoever the people would choose. At that time, he held a notorious prisoner, who was called Barabbas. He was a robber, who, for sedition raised in the city, and for a murder, had been cast into prison. Pilate then, thinking that I, the benefactor of all, a lover of peace, the restorer of life, should be preferred to this man, said to the assembled chiefs of the priests, to the magistrates, and the people, "It is a custom, that at the Passover, I release one to you. Which of the two, do you wish me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus?" But, at the indignation of the chief priests, the whole multitude exclaimed, "Not this one, but Barabbas." Consider, child, how this struck my heart, how deeply it affected my heart, how it tore my heart asunder. Contemplate me, standing behind Barabbas, in the sight of all, and see how I am treated, by the highest and the lowest, as the least of men. This disgraceful rejection, although it overwhelmed my heart with a feeling of pain, I suffered willingly, both that I might save, from the everlasting rejection of the reprobate, as far as lay in me, the wretched Barabbas, yourself my child, and the whole world, and that I might leave you an example, full of consolation. Do not then take it amiss, but endure it patiently, and resign with me, if you are placed beneath others. Why wonder if you who are dust, and nothing of yourself, suffers to be placed, for my sake, below others, when I, the Lord, and God of all, allow myself, for your sake, to be cast beneath the meanest of mortals? Since the time you first sinned, even venially, against the divine majesty, you truly deserved, not only to be placed below men, but even below irrational beings, which have not injured, or offended, the divine majesty. Therefore, child, when I permit you to be placed beneath others, be satisfied, as being in a place fit for you. Do not deem yourself to have been placed lower than is just. Examine too minutely the merits of others, nor your own, but consider my example, and descend in your heart still lower, knowing that the nearer you come to me by humiliations, the nearer you also shall be to me in glory. How could you be a true disciple of my heart, if you desire to be first, where I myself was last? Should the disciple go before the master? Is it not befitting for a disciple to follow his master? Therefore follow me, and willingly be the last with me. How many there are in the world, who are forced to occupy the last place, and because they do it, against that will, they do it without comfort, without merit. You, my child, stay cheerfully with me, and you shall have no cause for regret. Happy are you, if for love of me, you are willing by your own accord, to be placed behind all. For if you suffer in this manner, you will sanctify yourself, by those things which without will, befall you. Others shall sometimes be exalted, and placed like lights, upon the candlestick. You shall be overlooked, and put under the bushel. What others ask, they shall readily obtain, and they shall be thought to have deserved it. What you ask, shall appear unreasonable, or you shall be deemed unworthy of the object. What others say, shall be looked upon as well suited, or even as decisive. What you say, shall seem unsuitable or absurd. Others shall complain at pleasure, and many will sympathize with them. You, when suffering under pains, or hardships, if forced by necessity, you dare to speak, shall be thought disturbed in your imagination. The defects of others shall be dignified with an honorable name, your virtues shall be esteemed as the effects of a weak mind. Others they shall humor, but you shall be put down, and plead as an excuse, that you do not only deserve this, but that you stand in need of it. Not only in these few things, my child, may you be placed below others, other things may befall you, and when they occur, nature will be grievously afflicted. But, strengthen your courage, and, in spite of nature, continue with me, preferring to be the last with me, rather than the first, without me. Do not only gladly suffer, being placed below others, but wherever you are, and where you can do so lawfully, always pick the lowest place for yourself. There, child, is where you will find me, there you shall have me with you. If you do this, he that raises the lowly, will one day say to you, friend, go up higher. Then, you shall have glory, before the angels and saints. If the dignity of your state or office elevate you above the rest, let the humility of your heart, in a becoming manner, place you, for love of me, below the rest. By this, you are able to imitate me, to whom all power is given. Receive merit for yourself, and be more useful to others. Do not imagine that this kind of conduct is in any way hurtful to your authority. For, while it is proper and necessary that a superior upholds his authority, he cannot do this better than by the humble charity that does not merely hold the outward man in submission, but which also captivates the heart itself, keeps and fills it with love, confidence, and every good disposition. Do not reserve for yourself the greater and more showy performances, and leave to your subjects what is of less importance and more humble. On the contrary, as much as possible, reserve the latter for yourself, and assign the former to your inferiors. By this, you follow my example, gain the goodwill of your subjects, and stimulate their courage. By doing so, you shall better accomplish more things, by means of your subjects, than you can do by yourself, and while you are placed over others, as their companion, as their minister, you shall be seen with me. As much as it is left to you, choose rather to be subject, than to have command, wherever you may be placed. Shun every word and sign which may display your worth, talents, or other gifts and accomplishments, none that should render you to be a subject of vanity. Do not meddle in the affairs of others, as if you could better control them, neither show yourself ready to give advice, as if you were skillful, unless virtue demands it. Suffer willingly that others excel you in science, and other matters, even in outward virtues. Do carefully what you can. For the rest, rely upon the divine good pleasure, and glory with me in your humiliations. Know that only then have you attained to true holiness, when, for love of me, you rejoice that, in fact, or by efficacious affection, you are with me in the lowest place. But if as yet you are unable to attain to this perfectly, my child, pray and use your endeavors, and you shall come to attain to it.